Kia ora, ko whasmatau. Nā mai ki te whare, welcome to the House. During the recent sitting break, Parliament heard quite a few submissions on the Regulatory Standards Bill. And for those not following closely, that bill is the one championed by ACT leader David Seymour, which aims to improve the quality of legislation, whether statute or regulation. The Finance and Expenditure Committee is considering that bill. But this week, a different select committee had some briefings of its own on issues that arise from the bill, because it is potentially in conflict with the purpose, even the existence, of that committee, the Regulations Review Committee, which is chaired by Arana Williams.
As the chair, I would like to progress usefully for the Standing Orders Committee what the role of the Regulations Review Committee is now.
That question was asked of Sir Geoffrey Palmer, whose briefing was public. And because it was public, we can bring you moments from it as a mechanism for outlining the reason that this committee wanted briefings. It was Geoffrey Palmer's parliamentary reforms in the 1980s that created the Regulations Review Committee and gave it the job of fixing and even asking Parliament to kill bad regulation.
The Parliament has the power right now to disallow a whole range of statutory regulations.
In fact, the current committee asked the House to do exactly that earlier this year, and the House agreed. More often, though, the committee just asks ministers to fix poor regulation. And yes, that does clash with part of the purpose of David Seymour's new bill, which has its own outside group to do something similar. But before we get into that, let's jump back slightly with the original reason for the current committee.
The Economic Stabilisation Act, the Commerce Amendment Act of 1979, the National Development Act that allowed you to develop New Zealand by order in council and not by Parliament.
In Robert Muldoon's government, New Zealand was often governed without much reference to Parliament, despite the fact that Parliament, and not government, has supremacy.
These were very grave exercises of executive power, and that led to the repeal of all those statutes. And it also led to the setting up of this committee.
Despite that, Palmer pointed out that just because secondary legislation has been badly misused in the past, that doesn't mean it is bad or unnecessary.
You cannot run a country on the basis of primary legislation alone. It is not possible. And the ministers have to be able to have the ability to have administrative arrangements that are within the competence of the enabling provisions in the Primary Act that allows detail to be dealt with.
Many powers are necessarily delegated to a ministry or minister. Just imagine if you couldn't get a new passport until your name had been included in a new bill in Parliament.
The enthusiasm for terrific deregulation makes me nervous. I don't quite know where that desire comes from, because the evidence has not been put in front of this Parliament. It's asserted, but it's not generated as evidence anywhere that I have seen.
So what's the issue? Not more widely, but just in the context of the Regulations Review Committee.
There was nothing said about the Regulations Review Committee in the legislation, or indeed, as far as I can see, in any of the consideration that led to the drafting of this ill-considered bill.
And there should have been, because the jobs will, at best, overlap.
The conduct of this Parliament, already pretty unsatisfactory in many points of view, is going to get a whole lot worse when you have these confusing areas of responsibility that don't fit.
The committee asked the former Prime Minister which group would have supremacy if they were both trying to consider the same regulation.
The Regulatory Standards Board is a creature of the minister, and it is not a creature of Parliament. This committee is a creature of Parliament.
In other words, Parliament has supremacy over the executive, and the existing Regulations Review Committee would have supremacy over the proposed board. Palmer did also have advice for the committee and their backbencher colleagues.
If you are left alone, that would be good. But what you need to do is to be more muscular. The bad habits of New Zealand legislation have been somewhat restricted by the activities of this committee, but not enough. the bipartisan thing that is necessary to make the committee work properly needs to extend to backbenchers from the governing party feeling that they can exercise their judgment without fear or favour.
You've been listening to The House. It's a whakarango koe ki te whare. This program is produced with funding from Parliament's Office of the Clerk. Mā te wā.